Hi everybody, Mary Mitchell here. This is a 48 by 48 gallery wrapped canvas that I decided I would be very brave, and I got some wire mesh, and what you see me doing here is attaching it, trying to create a composition, something that I have in mind that could go either way, one way or the other. I have two visions for this. So depending on how it turns out after I apply the plaster of Paris mixture, I'll decide which way to go with this. So I want to get into more of the technical side right now of what I'm showing you here. I have gloves on because wire mesh can hurt your hands. It can poke into your fingers, and you need to protect your hands. And these are actual they have rubber for the palms and the bottom of the fingertips. In this here, I forgot to put my gloves back on, but no matter. I just soon discovered it. I needed to put them back on. So that's important. Get yourself a pair of gloves that will protect your hands if you're using wire mesh. Because when it pokes you, it can really hurt. I'm attaching the mesh with my staple gun. It's a nice lightweight staple gun that I bought, and it holds 1/4 inch staples and 3/8 of an inch staples both. I'm using a 1/4 inch right now. And I'm only doing it because, of course, I need to keep this in place when I get to the point where I'm going to be putting the plaster of Paris mix over it. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking this plaster coated strips of cloth gauze, and I'm cutting them into manageable sizes because if they're too long, it's just so much harder to work with. So I have some water there, and I'm putting in some wood glue. And the first thing I tried to do was just lay the gauze down and apply the water mixture with the paintbrush that you see me doing here. It did work. I tried it. I tried it both ways, and really the best way to do it is to dip the gauze into the water. It's a little more challenging to work with, but it worked out better when I compared doing it both ways. So anyway, moving forward, once I started dipping the strips directly into the water and applying it, it did seem to adhere better. It was a lot more challenging to handle it because it became I won't say mushy, but where it was stiff when it was dry, and then once you dip it, it becomes wet, and so you have to use your paintbrush to smooth it out and to smooth out any wrinkles or the sides, and make sure they're smoothed down. I found myself using my hands a lot to press the gauze down into the grooves of the mesh wiring and manipulate it where I wanted it to be. And I actually enjoyed this process, to be frank. Although it was challenging, it was a bit rewarding because to see it all go down like this and to see your creation start to come together, you begin to get excited about the next steps that are ahead. Working with the gauze was a bit frustrating, I will say as well, though, on the other hand, because there were a lot of strings that would come off the sides of the strips. So I found myself pressing them down or cutting them off. And because once it dries, it gets very stiff, and the strings get in your way. So, as I was going through this, and then when it dried, and I started to begin to apply my plaster of Paris mixture, I ended up cutting those strings, which is no big deal. You work with it, that's all. Another thing to mention is with the plaster on the strips, a lot of it does come off when you're cutting it, when you're placing it on there, when you're dipping it. So when you're using your paintbrush is important because you have to spread out what's left on the gauze. You have to spread it out to make it smooth so that there's no holes, that the gauze is not you have to cover it as much as you can with the plaster that's on there. Okay, let's jump ahead. Here is the plaster of Paris mixture, which I doubled how they say to mix it on the box, which is 2 part plaster to 1 part water. I did a lot of research. I followed the advice of putting the water in first and then the plaster. And then I also added some wood glue and some acrylic paint, some titanium white, because in my research I found out plaster of Paris, some people won't use it. Some people, they have different things they like to put into it. They have different experiences with it. They learn to work with it in different ways. And when you do your research, which I encourage you to do, you'll discover all of that yourself as well. So I was a little afraid to use it, really. I was intimidated by plaster of Paris. But I wanted to do this. I wanted to see how it turned out. I mean, artists make entire sculptures with this. I figured, why not? What have I got to lose? I do want to mention that the wood glue and the paint I mixed together first, and then I added it to the plaster of Paris after I mixed it into the water. So I did that first. The reason is because in my research I found out that wood glue can make the plaster of Paris dry faster. So if you're going to go that way, you want to mix it in after, as I described. So it turned out the mixture turned out really nice. The second go around, it was a lot thinner, easier to apply, lot less air bubbles, which is important. So you want to make sure that you have as little of those as possible, which is why they say to pour the water in first, then the plaster of Paris, and then of course the other mixture that I decided to add. Uh, as I said, I was a little nervous about this. I was nervous that once it dried, I would have trouble sanding it, that pieces may come off, as some artists described, that there would be chunks coming off. So I was, to say the least, a little concerned about that. But even if it did, I would start again. I would find a way and change my mixture. That's what I would have done. But as it turns out, I let this dry for several days, probably 4 or 5 days, because I get caught up doing other things. So once it was dry, I am now in the process of sanding it, which I will record. I began with a 220 sand grit, and I had various other sanding grit papers. For example, if you have the lower the number, the grittier the sandpaper, the higher number, the smoother it is. So I used my judgment based on what I was sanding over, and I often switched. So if the plaster seemed to be chunky, too lumpy, I would take a number 80, and very gently, and I really mean this, do not press hard, don't press down. It's hard. The piece is hard, but you remember under there you have wire mesh, and under there you have some parts between the mesh and the canvas that are, there's space. So if you press down too hard, you will collapse it. You will end up with chunks. So I was very careful, and I went around, in gentle circles. I took with my right hand, and my left hand I just laid on top of the table. I wanted to make sure that my pressure was kept very light. And I discovered that it sands very easily, so you don't have to apply a lot of pressure anyway. It sands, it responds very easily. And what I did after the small part that I did sand, is I took a soft brush and I just brushed the dust, over to the side of the canvas. So I'll be sanding next and recording that, so stay tuned, and I will see you soon. Thanks, everyone.